Okay, this is just a quick demonstration of how to get a mobile drop-down menu to actually work functionally. So I'm going to base this example off a previous example that we did a few weeks ago when we created the responsive website. So this one here, which we made responsive so that the layout changes depending on whether it's on a desktop, a tablet, or a mobile display. And as part of the mobile version of the layout, we changed the menu structure so that it was a drop-down menu like this. Now, the only problem with this was it doesn't actually function. So I've had a few requests of people who are implementing this in their prototypes, questions about how to actually get it to work. So I'm going to demonstrate that now. So I've made a couple of little changes to this example. Mainly I've just added some extra pages so that we can see that the links are actually working. And using the classic main navigational menu, I've hooked up the anchor tags so that they actually link to the various pages. So in the full version of the site, you can see that the links actually do work. Now, the only difference I have between these different pages is this title, this heading down here. So that's the only thing that you're going to see change between the pages, but you can see, and in the menu bar here, in the address bar, that the address is actually changing. So that works using the large navigation menu, but unfortunately it's not as easy using this small drop-down menu just to simply put links around these options and expect it to work. To get this to actually function, we have to implement this using JavaScript. So I'll demonstrate how to do that now. The first thing I'm going to do is create a new external JavaScript file, because I'll need to include this in all of my HTML pages that contain this compact navigation menu. So I'm just going to create a new folder, which I'll call JS, and inside of that I will create a new JavaScript file, and I'm going to call this mobile_menu.js. okay, and we'll leave that empty, and I'll start off on my index page looking here, and the first thing I'm going to do is add jQuery to this page, because I'm going to use that, a jQuery library, and I'm just going to load it from Google's CDN servers. Okay, so using this line here, and it's important that we load this before our custom script, which will use the jQuery library. So to load my custom JavaScript file that I just created there in, I do it like this. I'll script tag, and the source is simply pointing to my JS folder, and then the mobile_menu.js JavaScript file. Now, at the moment, this has nothing in it, so it's not going to do anything. So first of all, as I usually like to do, I'm just going to test that this is actually loading correctly. So I'm going to put jQuery document.ready handler in here, remembering that this allows us to only execute the code inside of here when the page is actually fully loaded. So to test that this works, I'm just going to put an alert in here, and I will reload the index page, okay, and it pops up the alert there. So this is telling me that the jQuery library is successfully working, and that it's finding my custom script correctly. So now that I know that, I can start going about actually making this compact navigation functional. So the first thing I'm going to do is, and I'm just going to remove that because I don't need that there. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is, first of all, I need to be able to select this compact navigation menu using jQuery, and then we're going to put an event listener on it that detects whenever we change the value, the selection of that drop-down menu. So if we look in this mobile view here, basically what I want jQuery to do is be able to detect any time that this value is changing here, and then respond appropriately and redirecting the page to the appropriate other HTML page. So in order to do that, what we need first of all is a jQuery selector, and I'm going to want to point to this select element here containing the various options, and that itself is inside of my nav element with an ID of compact-nav. So I can select this select element by going compact-nav space select. Okay, now to put a event listener on this to detect whenever the value of that select drop-down menu changes, I can say .change. Okay, and inside of here I write my event handler function. And now inside of here is where the code I put that I want to execute in response to the change event on that drop-down menu. So again, just to test that this actually works, we can, let's say we output to the console. Okay, so this will just test if our event listener is actually functioning on that select menu correctly. So I will just bring up my output console, reload the page. Okay, reload the home page, and when I change this selection, each time I change it, okay, it's outputting to the console that the selection has changed. Okay, so we know that that's working. So what I want to do now that I am responding to the change event is actually get the value of the option that is being changed here, and then use that to determine which page I want to redirect to. So you notice each option here has a value that's index page 1, page 2, and page 3. So I can get that value, and I'll save it in a variable called selected value by using this same jQuery selector here and saying calling a function called val. Okay, now if I want, I can output the value of selected value to the console, and that will tell me that should, each time I select one of these, output whatever is in this value attribute of the option element. So I will refresh this page again, change the selection, okay, outputs the corresponding value for each of these options. Okay, so now that we're detecting that, we can basically set up some sort of conditional code which says check what the value is of the currently selected drop-down menu, and then redirect the web page to whichever is the corresponding HTML page for that. So there's a couple of ways that we could do this. We could set up a bunch of conditional statements that look like this. Okay, so we could say if selected value equals index, and this is the line of code which actually will redirect the browser to another location. We say window.location.href equals, and then we can either put a full URL here or just a file name. And so this big if-else statement is essentially just detecting the value of the currently selected option, saying if it's the index, redirect the browser to index.html. If it's page 1, redirect the browser to page1.html, and so on and so forth for the other two options and pages. So let's try this then. So again, I will refresh the page, and now the only thing that you'll notice if this actually works as well, you'll notice two things. The URL should change up here, and the heading down here should change, because as I said before, that's the only bit of content that I actually changed for these other web pages. So if this is going to work, we should see that happen. So I'll click on page 1, okay, and we can see that the address bar loads up page 1.html, and the browser loads that web page. Now, what might be confusing is if I click this again, you'll notice that it won't function. And the reason for this is that we're no longer on our index.html page. We're now on page 1.html. Now, page 1.html isn't actually linking to my script. So what we have to make sure that we do is copy both the jQuery script and the link to our own custom script over to each of these other web pages which uses that drop down menu. So there's page 1, page 2, and page 3, making sure that I save all of those. Okay, now it should work for all the pages. So we're on the home page again, or the index.html page. Now we're on page 1. Now page 2. Now page 3. Okay, now what you'll notice is that even though we're on page 2 here, or any of these other pages, you'll notice that it's defaulting back on the menu here to the home option. Now this is going to be confusing for the user. Really, this should display whatever is the current page. Now the reason it does that is by default it's just going to load up the first one of those options. Now we can tell the web browser which one to display by default simply by adding an attribute to the option that we want selected by default. So what I'm going to do is set that up for each of these pages. So on my index page, I'm going to put the selected attribute, and the value that we actually give it is selected as well. So you might think it should be true or false, but for whatever reason, the value that you have to give it to tell it to be selected is selected. So on the index.html page, we'll have that first one with the selected attribute, and then on each subsequent page, we will have the appropriate option value selected. So this is page 1.html, so I want page 1 to be the default option, and same deal for page 2 there, and page 3 there. Okay, so now let's reload the home page again. Now this time when we change to page 1, okay, it retains that page 1 in the menu there, so that makes a lot more sense for the user. It's not confusing. Okay, page 2 loads, page 3. There's a problem with page 3. There's a problem in my code here. I didn't change this to page 3. There we go. Okay, let's try that again. Page 3. There we go. Page 3 loads. Page 2, page 1, and the home page. Okay, so that all works, but I'm just going to show you one more thing. If we're a little bit clever about how we name the values for each of these drop-down options, then we can get away with writing this code a bit more compactly. So what I'm going to do is comment that out, and instead I'm going to achieve the same thing by simply writing window.index location.href equals selected value, okay, which is going to be one of these, index page 1, page 2, or page 3. And then I'm just going to concatenate or add on to the end of that the string .html. So the result of that is going to be the window location is going to be either index.html, page1.html, page2.html, or page3.html. Okay, and that is exactly what I have my files named as. So, as I said, if you're a little bit clever about how you name these values and you match them up with the exact file names of your other web pages, then you can actually get the same effect of this big if-else statement just by simply writing this one line of code here. So we'll save that and see if that works. So we'll reload the home page again. Okay, page 1, page 2, page 3. Go back the other way. Okay, and they all work. And our big menu should still work as well. Okay, that shouldn't have any impact on making that work. See this changing down here still. Okay, so that's how you get the compact drop-down navigation to work. So the important things to remember that we need to do this with JavaScript. We can't do it just purely in HTML. I'm using jQuery here, so in each of my web pages I'm loading jQuery and my own custom JavaScript. Okay, make sure it's very important that you do that in each web page that requires this functionality. And the other important thing is if you want to use this method rather than a big if-else statement, and this will save you a lot of coding, especially if you have a lot of pages, is to make sure that you name the value attributes such that they're essentially the same as your file names. And if you do all that, then it should work correctly. So that's that. If you have this style of navigation and you want to, go ahead and implement that, and I will post the example code for it as well.